Got it. So this is the monthly or one of the monthly roundtables of SBCAN. We have usually a North and South County separate roundtables, but this time we're doing a joint one because the issues are clearly county-wide. What I was going to try to say about this is that we're entering this phase of the regular housing element planning revisions that occur when a new housing element is developed. Historically, my feeling is this is often the moment when a lot of neighborhood people start resisting rezoning and feeling threatened by more housing. That's historically been really hot kind of thing in the past. My own feeling is that the political and currents have changed because people are recognizing the desperate need for housing and for a better balance between job where people live and where people work, cutting down on commuting and making for more community. And so that's maybe a kind of new era that we're entering with the new housing element. And the reason for today's roundtable, I think, most immediately is that the Board of Supervisors is going to have something, I think, unusual in terms of the past, which is a special workshop on, and that's part of what we want to understand. What is that going to be about? And how do people like us participate, or how should we view that as an opportunity for input? And that's one big topic. The second is the builder's remedy, which is another new wrinkle in all this. What is this about? How do we think it's going to affect the planning processes here in the county? I'm very eager to hear this because I'm getting very conflicting beliefs on the part of people about what that's all about. Mm-hmm. And the final, maybe big topic is saying all the, well, there's two more. So what is the rest of the process of upzoning that people need to know about? Where do we go after the Board of Supervisors workshop? How is that going to look? What is the timetable? And then finally, what do we expect the outcome of all this to be in terms of the likelihood of more genuinely affordable housing? Or are we also going to continue the rather dramatic shortfall in the creation of affordable housing in the county, even after all of this? So we invited a couple of people who are very thoughtful and knowledgeable. They are Alex Tuttle, who is in charge of long-range planning at the County Planning Division, and Dianne Black, who is active with the League of Women Voters Housing Committee and has a long history with county planning as well. So welcome to both of you. And Alex, you want to take it? Oh, let me say this on terms of rules. What we usually have done, and it's worked, is to have questions put in the chat, and the speaker and the moderator, me, will monitor this. And when the time comes for Q&A, we'll try to condense and put forward the questions that appear in the chat. If after that process is exhausted, there's still things people want to raise without going into the chat, maybe we'll have time for that. We always try to end promptly at 1:30. The speakers may not be with us through all that time. We hope they can stick around as much as possible. And that's the way we'll do it. So Alex, thanks for being here. I know you're busy.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, hi everyone. Alex Tuttle with Planning and Development. As Dick said, I am the manager of the Long Range Planning Division. It's a fairly new role for me. I've been in it for less than a year, but it's with housing, and so it's been baptism by fire. Prior to that, I've been with the department for a little over 20 years, but in other aspects of the work. So I've learned a lot over the last 9+ months, and feel like I got the grasp of most of it. And so hopefully what I share with you today is helpful and informative. So the question, there's questions about the process and how to participate. And as Dick mentioned, there is a workshop, board-sponsored workshop on March 19th. And what prompted that was on, as most people know, our housing element was adopted back in December. And we approached it from a two-step process. So we adopted the housing element, and then the rezones that were identified in the housing element would come later. So that's step one is complete. Now we're into step two with the rezone, where in some cases the rubber meets the road. So on January 9th, the Board of Supervisors held an item at their hearing where they identified interests and criteria that they'd be considering when it came down to the rezones, things that they were hoping to see from projects as they come forward. Things like the level of affordability, maybe going beyond the bare minimum, local preference, making sure the housing goes to local workforce and not outside interests, recreational opportunities, childcare, incorporated into projects. They had a list of about 10 different criteria that they expressed interest in seeing with projects going forward. So the idea behind this workshop is for an opportunity for some of the properties who have developed some concept plans or in the process of developing plans to come and kind of show what they're thinking, and give an opportunity for the board to ask questions, for the public to make comments and ask questions as well, and just an opportunity for the public and decision makers to get a feel for some of these projects, as a way of potentially informing the rezone decisions. As many people may know, we have identified more possible rezone sites than are necessary to meet our housing obligations. So the decision makers will have some options. I would say they have more options in the North County because the RENA requirements in the North County are lower than they are in the South County. So fewer options in the South County, but nevertheless, the board still has some options. And so the idea behind this workshop is to inform the rezone process and see what the rezones might translate to if the sites get rezoned and projects come forward.
How many do you expect to present?
Right now we have about 10, I would say, 10 different sites that will be present, or at least that's about how many we extended invitations to, because they either had a application already pending with the department, or we were aware that they had a concept plan in preparation. Can't confirm that they will all attend, but about 10 is what we would expect. And how it's going to unfold is it will be in the Planning Commission hearing room here in Santa Barbara. It'll be in the afternoon after the board hearing is over that day. This is a special workshop, so it's on a Tuesday following the board hearing. We expect it to start about 2 p.m. And each developer or property owner will have about 10 minutes to kind of present their concepts. And then we will also have an opportunity where out in the lobby area, we'll have some tables set up for each of the properties where they can have like poster boards or displays on their projects, and there can be a little interaction with members of the public and whoever's interested in talking with individual properties.
Do you think there'll be public comment during the presentation part?
After the lobby interaction, then everyone would shuffle back into the hearing room where there would be public comment, and the board could ask questions, and it could be a little interactive at that point.
So what's the geographical location of these 10? Are they all South County? Linda wanted to know.
Majority South County, but there are a few North County projects. It initially started off as being entirely South County, but the board actually on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, had an item on their agenda where they discussed extending the invitation to a few North County projects as well.
So of the how many total rezone possibility properties are there?
Total rezone possibilities, there are 18 in the South Coast, and 18 in the North County.
Okay, all right. So,
but a lot of those, well, I don't know about a lot, but not all of them have a plan, essentially. So some are probably just waiting in the wings to see what happens, and then they would come forward with some sort of project. So it's really an opportunity for those properties that have a concept plan that they are ready to share with the board and with the public.
And am I right in saying that all the parcels that were selected, you had some indication that they wanted to do housing?
Correct. Part of the requirement and what made this housing element cycle particularly challenging was in years past or prior cycles, it was there was not a lot of skin in the game. We didn't really have to prove the feasibility or likelihood of sites getting developed. We just had to show the zoning could accommodate. This time around, the state really wanted to see sites that had a reasonable likelihood of being developed. And so part of the challenge was identifying sites, not only suitable sites, but sites where the property owner had a potential interest in developing. And so that's why, for example, we got a lot of comments about why some of the shopping centers in the South County weren't identified, like Magnolia Shopping Center or Turnpike Shopping Center. And the simple fact is those are active shopping centers, and we reached out to them, spoke to them, and they just weren't ready to commit to developing any housing within this cycle. So we couldn't rely on them. Doesn't mean they can't be developed in the future. It's just we couldn't rely on them as part of this current housing cycle.
So in this mix of sites, are county-owned sites part of the mix that's going to be presented or mentioned?
Not at the developer workshop, no.
So those are additional sites in the mix?
They are in the mix in terms of helping the county meet its RHNA. So essentially, we have a shortfall of a certain number of units in the South Coast. The shortfall is about 1,600 lower income units and about 850 moderate income units. And so, and that shortfall is based on what is our requirement minus what our current capacity is. So current capacity is what is our current zoning reasonably gonna accommodate, plus projected ADUs over the next 8 years, as well as pending projects, meaning projects that are already either have recently received entitlements or are in the entitlement process. So when you take those into consideration, then you're left with your shortfall. And where the rezones come into play is through a combination of the rezone sites and the county-owned sites. The board needs to identify enough units to make up that shortfall. through various combinations. So there's 9 county-owned sites in the South Coast that have been identified as, again, being suitable and a reasonable likelihood that they could be developed over the next 8 years.
So before we go on to the other questions on the agenda, Dianne, do you have any comment on what Alex has said so far?
No, I think Alex is going to go into the builder's remedy projects, and I'm just curious because I noticed a shift in the way that those were treated
Right.
in the planning tool.
Okay, great.
Tool.
That's an important, that's key to what I wanted to see us accomplish today. So
But
talk about that, Alex. Yeah.
Sure.
and can I make one other comment about
Yeah, please. Yeah.
March 19th? So I think March 19th is more for us, for the public to hear what developers are proposing. The board and the planning commission aren't going to be making any decisions that day. So I'm less inclined to think we have to come with a bunch of comment letters unless people have general comments they want to make. And I think that that's probably going to be more effective when we start the planning commission and board hearing process, which I'm sure Alex will talk about.
Yeah, I agree. It's really a show and tell.
Right.
An opportunity for people get a look at things, ask some questions. No action is going to be taken. And part of doing that also clears the way for when the rezone hearings do occur. There's not going to be a lot of discussion or time for individual owners to present their projects at that point. So hopefully everyone by then will have a sense of what they might be getting. So let's talk builder's remedy. So everyone's probably favorite topic. Yeah, so builder's remedy is essentially a state tool in place for jurisdictions that don't have compliant housing elements. And essentially what it does is if your housing element is out of compliance, it allows a property to be developed that is inconsistent with its zoning or land use designation, meaning you could build a bunch of housing units on an agriculturally zoned site because you're not subject to the density limits that are typically tied to zoning. So the other thing with builder's remedy is I think there's maybe some misconceptions about what it grants a property owner and what it doesn't. And so let me just try to clarify as best I can. Builder's remedy does not exempt someone from still going through the permit process. So they still have to obtain the necessary permit entitlements. It does not exempt someone from CEQA. So a project under builder's remedy is still subject to environmental review under CEQA, whatever is deemed the appropriate level for the scope of the project. What is limited through builder's remedy is, again, you can't deny a project or limit a project on the basis of density tied to the general plan or to the zoning. So that's not something we can factor in. And then the other thing is there's a very limited criteria by which a project can be denied. And really, for a project to be denied, it would have to be demonstrated that there's a substantial adverse impact on public health or safety.
Mm-hmm.
That's really where you'd have to kind of focus efforts in denying your project. Can't deny it on density, can't deny it on neighborhood compatibility, things of that nature, or impacts on the environment. Project still has to be subject to objective standards in the code.
Did you freeze?
The quick overview of builder's remedy.
You froze for a minute, Alex, so I'm not sure if we got all of you said you couldn't deny based upon neighborhood compatibility or environmental impacts, but you could on public health and safety, significant impacts.
Significant impact on public health and safety is really the focus, or your limited ability to deny a project. A project still has to adhere and comply with objective standards of the code and objective policies where they apply. So things like setbacks and heights, and we have our objective design standards that were adopted in the inland area last January. Those project would have to adhere to those, but that's kind of the extent of our review authority. So the county became subject to builder's remedy, open to builder's remedy last February, when we had not adopted our housing element. So between February and just recently, when we adopted the housing element and it was found to be in compliance with state law, builders, an applicant or owner could submit for builder's remedy application. We received 15 builder's remedy applications. And I think there's some questions about how were they categorized, and really we look at we kind of have three types of builder's remedy applications. And hopefully this makes sense to everyone, but when the housing element was being drafted, we had identified our sites inventory that established what our current capacity was, and so our sites inventory again includes pending projects, existing zoning, and ADUs. Two pending projects are what's known as the Baylor project in Carpinteria, and the Tatum project, the Santa Barbara Unified School District project off of Hollister. Those are listed as pending projects in our housing element because they have an application pending. Subsequent to the draft, they submitted or invoked builder's remedy. So it's basically another layer of protection for those projects to allow them to move forward through the entitlement process. So that's kind of one bucket of builder's remedy applications, or applications that were invoked on pending projects. The second category of builder's remedy, I'm just looking it up, is rezone sites. We had several sites that were identified in the housing element as potential rezone sites. Since the builder's remedy application was open, that window was open, several of those rezone sites subsequently came in and submitted builder's remedy applications. That includes San Marcos Growers, Georgie, Montessori, and Key Site 26 up in Orchid. So those are 4 sites that were identified.
He froze again.
Window was open for builder's remedy. And then the last category of builder's remedy applications are sites that were never contemplated or identified in the housing element. And I think there's, let's see, There's about 7 or 8 of those projects. A lot of them are in Isla Vista. But there's, I think, maybe 1 in Carpinteria and 1 or 2 up in the North County as well.
Uh-huh.
So that sort of constitutes the range of builder's remedy applications. And so the question is, how does that relate to the board's action on the rezones, and how does it affect our arena and our obligations for housing units? And it's a tricky question and not very easy to explain, but I will do my best. Before I get into that, any questions come in I needed to answer?
I didn't see any, but I want to reemphasize. So they have to, the projects under builder's remedy have to have a, what is it, 20% quote unquote affordability?
Yes, that is correct. One of the requirements for builder's remedy is that the project have include at least 20% of the units affordable.
And how does it, is it defined what affordability means?
Lower income.
Lower income, okay,
Yeah.
right.
20% lower.
Yeah, so in thinking about this, my question is if we could get for the upzone sites, the that are being considered but are being targeted as builder's remedy, could we actually get more affordability if they were not builder's remedy? That's one of the concerns that I was.
And I think that is maybe one of the biggest questions and one of the biggest unknowns. So with the housing element, and I know there's some thoughts on this, but assumptions were made as to the affordability of the sites if they were to get rezoned and build out. We assumed in the South Coast that sites that are rezoned at a density of at least 20 units per acre, some up to 30 or 40 units per acre, would develop with up to 50% lower income, 50% of the units lower income, 25% moderate income, and the remaining 25% above moderate. So those were the assumptions that kind of went into the calculations as to how many sites need to get rezoned in order to meet our arena obligations. Builder's remedy come in and they just need to meet the 20%. And so every builder's remedy application that was submitted came in with 20% of their units affordable. So far lower than what was assumed with our housing element estimates with the rezones. So what happens next? Essentially, and this is where it gets a little legalistic, but builder's remedy sites that I'll start from the bottom. Builder's remedy sites that came in after the housing element was drafted that were not identified in the housing element. So these are the ones like in Isla Vista and elsewhere. The county cannot rely on those units to meet its arena and satisfy the state requirements because they weren't included or identified in our adopted housing element. So, and this is again, it's nuanced. If those sites actually build out, move forward with their builder's remedy applications and build out with those 20% units, we can count them on the back end towards meeting our arena later down the line when they actually get built. But we can't count them on the front end in terms of reducing the number of sites that need to get rezoned. Okay. The state won't allow us to do that. Huh? So those kind of get pushed off to the side. And if they get built, great. We can get a few extra affordable units out of them. The sites that were identified in the housing element as potential rezone sites that have subsequently submitted for builder's remedy, for the county to take credit for the units towards meeting our RENA, the county has to rezone those sites. They can't say, oh, well, they've come in as a builder's remedy project, so we'll just proceed that way. If the county wants to take credit for those units, those sites have to get rezoned. The issue with builder's remedy is there's no guarantee that those projects will be successful and move forward. There's a lot of process, a lot of hurdles they need to go through. So the rezone gives a greater level of certainty, and if those projects come undone, the rezone, at least the sites are zoned to accommodate the higher density development. So the sites like Georgie, Montessori, San Marcos Growers, if the county wants to and needs to count those units towards meeting its RENA, then they would have to be rezoned. Presumably, if they get rezoned, the applicants would withdraw their builder's remedy applications and then pursue development under the rezones. That's the presumption, but it's up to the landowner as theoretically to decide which way they want to go. So I can't, that's not really our call to make. The two other sites that were listed as pending projects, that's Baylord and Tatum, that also have builder's remedy. Those were already in as pending projects and they remain as pending projects. So the builder's remedy doesn't really affect the calculation at all, because they already had projects in and a certain number of units identified, and those have already been built into all of our modeling and calculations. So the board can rezone those, but is not obligated to rezone those.
So in the things like the growers, San Marcos Growers, and the other projects that were in the rezone properties so the county would have to rezone according to the builder's remedy 20%, or the county could, so the county could rezone at a higher affordability standard than the builder's remedy.
Well, so just to be clear, the affordability, those are just assumptions that the county identified or included. When we rezone a site to 20 units or 30 units an acre,
right,
made assumptions that 50% of the units would be lower income and 25 moderate. Those are just assumptions. That doesn't require the property owner to do that. So that's kind of where we're at, is that the sites can be rezoned and we can assume a higher percentage of affordable units, but there's no guarantee that they would actually be built out to those levels. And that then triggers what is called no net loss. And this is where we have to have, the county and other jurisdictions have to put real skin in the game. We've made assumptions. Rezones will happen accordingly. If at any time through our 8-year housing cycle, a project builds at with fewer affordable units than what was assumed, and we find ourselves in a situation where we no longer can meet our RENA, then the county would likely have to rezone additional sites to make up that difference. That is in part why the county has developed or has implemented or incorporated a 15% buffer. So we have our RENA, minimum RENA numbers, and then we've added a 15% buffer on top of that for the lower and moderate income. So that buffer is really intended to give a little breathing room in case projects come in with either lower density or fewer affordable units than what was assumed. That said, to your question, Dick, by rezoning a site, there's certainly the greater possibility that the site would have greater numbers of affordable units than what was included with their builder's remedy applications. But we can't guarantee that.
Well, do we have any leverage over those builders remedy projects to get them to do that?
Well, the leverage is that there's a potential benefit through rezones for some projects that they could take advantage of, and that is when we rezone a site under the housing element and they build out at least 20 units an acre, they could take advantage of what's referred to as by right permitting for their project, meaning it's a ministerial streamlined permit, no further CEQA, no public hearings. It's staff level ministerial approval. So projects that are rezoned and come forward and meet the minimum requirements could take advantage of that by right process and forego a lot of the other things that would normally slow down a project or open it up for appeals and whatnot. So that is attractive to certain properties to be able to take advantage of that, and they can't take advantage of that without the rezone.
Oh, okay.
There are limits, so it would mostly apply to projects that are 100% rental, primarily because if you have to do a subdivision, the subdivision is not exempted from the normal discretionary process. So projects that include a for sale component would likely get pulled back into the discretionary review and not be able to take advantage of the by right.
Okay. So there are a bunch of questions. I think maybe Dianne, you should comment on this, and then we'll
Sure.
turn to the chat questions.
Sure. That was really helpful, Alex, because
Very helpful.
I don't think that's the thinking of the department initially, because everything was shown as all of the builder's remedy projects initially were shown as part of the pending project list. So,
Yes.
so
It has evolved. Our understanding has evolved.
yeah, no, I get it. I mean, it's a brand new thing. I never had to deal with this so maybe I should introduce myself before I talk a little bit more so you understand. I said I never had to deal with this. For those of you that don't know me, I worked at the county in the planning and development department for 35 years and retired 5 years ago this month as the director, but mostly I worked for about 20 years as the assistant director and at other positions throughout my career. So I went through a bunch of housing elements, and I have to say this one was exponentially harder than any other housing element. And, I really admire that the staff got the work done that they got done. Almost every jurisdiction missed the deadline. So this is not really a county issue. It's really a housing element issue in this particular cycle. And of all of the housing elements that I've reviewed in the South Coast for the cities and the counties is the best. So, it's the easiest to read. It's the most understandable, has really good policies. So I think the staff did a really good job. So I just say that because some of my comments are going to sound critical, and they're not meant to be. They're dealing with the hand they got dealt, and they only have certain tools that they can use. So going back to builder's remedy, I'm kind of surprised that the state wouldn't allow you to include those projects that weren't included in what am I trying to say? I'm surprised they wouldn't allow you to include San Marcos, Georgie, and Montessori because they were included in the site inventory, but now they're pursuing builder's remedy. So are you saying if those actually developed as builder's remedy projects, we wouldn't be able to count any of those units?
Without them being rezoned,
Yes.
correct?
Wow. Okay, that's a pretty major deal, because I think those three projects are very, very, very likely to go forward. They've been chomping at the bit for 20 years, probably, to develop. So I think that's important for people to understand, is we could get the development that they're proposing under builder's remedy and not be able to take credit for them. And the number of units for those three is quite high. Georgie is proposing 1,200 units, over 1,200, Montessori 341, and San Marcos almost 1,000. So those are big numbers not to be able to take credit for.
And just to clarify, and I mentioned before, we can take credit for them once built.
Oh, you can. I
It's
thought you
just
said only the Ivy and Van Wingerden. So you could take credit for those after they're built?
after they're built and
Okay.
when we're doing our annual reporting on our
Okay.
progress towards meeting our RENA, we just
Okay.
can't take credit for them up front
Meet your rezones.
to meet our rezones.
Okay, okay, that's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
The other thing I think was pretty interesting is that the sites that are rezoned above 20 units per acre and above, is that right, Alex?
Yeah.
Can be by right development, and that is a pretty huge incentive. But builders remedies aren't quite by right, but they're pretty darn close, but they still require CEQA, correct?
Yeah. Correct.
So a difference that might matter to some people if they're really looking to expedite the process. They might do the builder's remedy, and then, I mean, the by right. And then under by right development for 100% rental, is there any affordability requirement?
Yes. Minimum 20%.
Rental? For rental?
Minimum 20%.
I thought you guys got rid of the rental.
If they want to do the
inclusion. Oh, by right. So 20%. And at what level?
lower or moderate. Yeah.
Okay, so any income level that's in the affordable range.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but that's the same as the builder's remedy percent, isn't it?
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, to take advantage of the by right processing. Yeah.
So I think the most significant thing about the site inventory is the assumptions that are made and then the reality. And the assumptions are quite aggressive. And I know the staff knocked down the assumptions. They could have assumed more, but they chose to knock them down a little bit. But if we don't meet those assumptions, then we're going to be back at rezones again. And I think that's really important for people to understand. And, you know, there might be a site or two where you'll get more than 20%, but I wouldn't say that the majority of the private developers will exceed 20%. So it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. I don't even know if we've identified enough sites, if the sites develop at the level that they could, to even meet RENA in the entire cycle. And another interesting thing about where we're at with RENA right now is given pending projects and the ADUs that Alex talked about before, we're still at a deficit of about 2,500 affordable units. And we are over the target in above moderate by 800 units. Right. So these rezones are going to require, are going to allow for a lot more market rate housing. And we're going to be way over what the state requires. So, so where does that leave us? I think for the league, and I represent the League of Women Voters in this conversation, we are really focused on three things, because we don't think that we can rezone our way out of this. I know we have to do the rezones to be compliant with state law, and I'm not saying we shouldn't rezone property, but that's not going to get us to the affordability levels that are required under RENA. So we believe we need to focus on financing, a very robust permanent source of financing for affordable housing. We believe that we need to identify more public sites, and there are some public sites identified, county sites, but I think all of the county sites only add 284 units, most of which are affordable, but not even all of them. So that's kind of, to me, is if a county site is being developed, I don't think there's any reason that all of the units shouldn't be affordable. But 284 is just a little drop in the bucket. So public funding, public sites, and then Alex alluded to the third thing, which is local preference, because I think, and my focus, I'm sorry, I should have said this, is all on South County. So these are all South County numbers, because that's the jurisdiction that our league represents. But the third was local preference, because if we end up developing anywhere near the number of units that are called for under RENA, and they don't go to people who live and work here, I think we've completely failed.
Right.
Because that's the problem we're trying to solve. So that's sort of my addition to that point. The point about the rezones and builders.
Diane, the bottom line of what you just said, you may have implied it, but make it clear. Under the present scenarios that we see, the shortfall of affordability would continue to be very significant, right? Is that what you're?
I think what we will be facing and is, as sites develop, they're more likely to develop at about the 20% level. And if they do, there will come a time where we don't have enough property available to meet our low and moderate income targets. And so the rezoning process that Alex talked about, when you hit that, will occur, and we'll have to rezone additional sites. I think that's a very likely scenario, and I'm very sad that that's the case, but we just don't have a lot of tools, and we think the really big ones are money and land and local preference.
Right. And so the money part is what a bunch of us have talked about for a couple of years now, is a countywide bond issue or some similar mechanism to generate a large amount of public money for this purpose. And so you're putting that front and center, our concern. Could I add one thought on this, and Alex comment on this? It seems workable in some of these projects, if we had the leverage to demand that they partner with the housing authority on this, and that the housing authority would provide a considerably larger percentage of affordable units in that case. I don't know whether, that's why I asked about leverage. Is there a way to get some of these developers to really say, yes, let's carve out part of what we're doing in partnership with the housing authority? And there are two projects already, the Ballard, the Carpinteria adjacent one that you mentioned before, and the Mission Ridge, is it, in Goleta, that are designed that way. And I know the city housing authority is trying to advance that idea within the city private development. So you have any comment on that, either Alex or Diane?
Sure. And let me just respond to Diane's comments about the assumptions. And
yeah, good, great, thanks.
There's hope, or an expectation, a hopeful expectation, that some of the projects will come in 100% affordable because of entities like Housing Authority or People Self-Help or St. Vincent's. There's a couple of St. Vincent's properties, and we expect those to come in at high levels of affordability. And the hope expectation is that would help overcome or offset projects that come in at that 20% level. But Diane is absolutely right that if projects, if we don't get that and all projects only come in at the 20% level, we will find ourselves in a situation of having to rezone additional sites at some point in the not too distant future. As far as leverage, I don't know that we have as much leverage as we would to the point of requiring or demanding a higher percentage of affordability or demanding partnership with housing authority. What the housing element does set up is 25 programs that will be implemented over the next several years, some of which go to incentives and reducing sort of barriers to the development to make it more increase the likelihood that projects can come in with some of these added benefits, whether it be a greater percentage of affordable. For example, right now, all the benefits for a developer go towards the lower income units in terms of incentives. There are not a lot of incentives in place for building moderate income units, even though that's a significant need in our community. So some of the things we'll be looking at and working towards over the next couple of years are increasing incentives and making moderate units more likely outcome of some of these projects through various means. Certainly the local preference is a big part, and part of I think what you'll hopefully hear at the March 19th workshop is some of the developers already engaged in some of that, partnering with local employers, working with, you might have heard that the South Coast Chamber of Commerce has been developing this local employer-sponsored consortium that employers can participate in that would sort of accumulate funds that can be used towards master leases or buying a portion of a project's units that they can then dole out to their employees. So there's definitely various things in the works to address the local preference issue, and will continue to be. The funding is another identified program to look into and to develop. I know the league is pushing to have that front and center and fast tracked and not delay any further. So there are various ways, more incentive based than sort of stick based, in terms of trying to increase the affordability.
Right. I have one more point about builder's remedy, which is sort of off the wall maybe, but I can't escape feeling that there's a real contradiction here, that builder's remedy is designed to correct the situation where communities refuse to do what the state is requiring them to do with respect to planning. And yet we're talking about a situation where potentially builder's remedy will undermine the desire of the community to do what the state says it wants done in terms of affordable housing. Isn't there the possibility of some kind of legal test or amendment to that legislation based on that? I'm wondering if that's gotten any discussion in your house, Alex or Dianne.
It is fairly untested through the courts. I know some jurisdictions have sort of pushed back against the state and pushed back against applicants coming in with builder's remedy. And I believe there are some court cases that are beginning or in process pending. But there hasn't been a lot of court cases that, or very few, if any, court cases that have been completed on the topic, as far as I know. And I don't know that our jurisdiction is in any hurry to be the test piece on that.
Right. So I see a number of kind of questions in the chat, but Linda, you just raised something that maybe you should voice. You could say this about San Marcos growers. It's a pretty concrete thing you're.
Well, we have so many builders remedies there. I think there are 5 right next to each other. And so we'll get at least 1,800 units. And that doesn't include across the 101 at the MTD property, which is a pending project. And if you look at the plans, because of builder's remedy, we're getting 17% low income. This is likely in current plans, 17% low income and 1% moderate. So the moderate just completely disappears as a result of the builder's remedy. So we are talking about what we can do about that.
Yeah,
Got to do something.
that is one of the things we've seen with these builders remedy cases is, you know, our assumptions for some of these sites of getting moderate income units if they move forward with their builders remedy. They're not factoring that in or proposing that. So one thing, if people who have been playing around with our balancing act simulation tool a fair amount, one thing that they may have noticed recently is that to account for some of that shortfall in the moderate income, some of the county-owned sites have actually shifted their we've shifted the assumptions for some of the county-owned sites from lower income actually to moderate income, because using that tool, it's suggesting that we might have a harder time getting to the moderate requirement than we will getting to the lower income. Again, it's all you know, a math game at this point, and there's obviously endless ways of configuring it to where you get to your magic number for both the lower and moderate income.
Well, because the lower is, we're in a shortfall of 1,651 units, and for moderate, we're only in a shortfall of 855. So
We need both.
If the 50% and 25% ratio were to actually hold true, you'd get both at about the same time.
Yeah, you would. But I think Linda is correct that with some of the builder's remedy applications, that's shifted the calculus a little bit. And then, well, for San Marcos growers, not to get too deep into the weeds, but that project, even though it's listed as a potential rezone site, the numbers of units that are reflected in the housing element and that go into the model figuring out our RENA are based on their application, not on the 50, 25, 25 assumption. So that's one of that's a bit of an anomaly with that particular site, just because of the timing at which they submitted their application.
You alluded to something, Alex, before about a tool that people can play with. What could maybe that touches on the question of how we can participate in things.
Yeah, so because it's also complicated, and there's a lot of different ways to reach the magic numbers of our arena targets. We have worked with this company to develop this online tool. It's called the Balancing Act, where you can go in and all the different sites are listed and the number of units that each site is assumed or proposed to provide. And essentially you can go in and be the decision maker by selecting which sites you think should be rezoned or which county-owned sites should be selected to meet the magic number. And if you want me to, I can share my screen and I can just show you the tool real quick.
You want to do that?
Dick, I would recommend it because I think it's really helpful.
Great. Okay. Why don't we do that? And
Okay.
meanwhile, I'll check, let's check the chat list and see if there's other questions that we could put on the table. Some of them are answered, I think. Uh, so Heritage Ridge, that's right. Uh,
Can people see my screen?
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the balancing act tool. We have one for the South Coast and one for North County because they are two separate RENA requirements and two separate targets. So we have split them up. So I'm using the South Coast as an example. And essentially what you see here is it shows the shortfall of units, both the total units as well as a breakdown by income level. So the orange here you see is we're a shortfall of a little over 1,600 units, the moderate shortfall of 855, and then the above moderate you can see we're in the green, which means we are at or above the RENA requirement. So we don't really need any new above moderate. We're going to get them because every project or most every project will include them, but it's not where our need is. So that's our baseline, and then there's some instructions that I'm going to skip through here, but essentially you get to a point in the tool where you can start selecting sites. And so it has, it explains our current capacity, meaning our ADUs, our vacant sites and how many units we're getting from those, and then the pending projects. So all the pending projects show up. You know, you have Baylor, Polo Villa. Some of these are either already have their permits or applications in place, and it has all the unit breakdown. So these pending projects are baked into the numbers. So they're already factored in. You can't deselect a pending project or not count it because it's already kind of part of our baseline numbers. Then you get to, oh, and by the way, we highlight those pending projects that have a builder's remedy application tied to them. You'll see that some of these will say 0 housing units. Those are the ones like in Isla Vista that they're out there, they're in process, but we can't claim credit for any of the units. So that's why they show up as 0. So then at the bottom, you get into select potential rezone sites and county-owned sites. And this is where you can start playing around. So it has all the potential rezone sites and all the county-owned sites, and it identifies the number of units in each income category. And so don't take this as my position. I'm just going to run through and select some sites, and you'll see how the numbers start changing. And really what you're trying to do is get to green along the top of the board. So I'll select St. Athanasius, Scott. And what you can see is the numbers start changing. Caird. And there's a corresponding map that you'll see once, if I select a site, it'll change colors. So my sites that I've selected go from light green to dark green. We'll select Georgie. We'll select San Marcos Growers. And again, you can just start seeing the numbers along here. We're still down. We selected all these. We're still down about 600 lower income, 140 moderate. And let's start going. Let's toggle all the county-owned sites, and we'll see what happens. And you can see that, okay, we selected all the county-owned sites and now we're clear on the moderate and clear on the above moderate, but we still have a shortfall of 500 lower income units. So we need to rezone some additional sites. So let's see, what else can we grab? Montessori. And there's some above here. Friendship Manor, that's in Isla Vista. Couple of sites down in Carpinteria, Van Wingerden. And we're getting close, not quite there yet. St. Vincent's, there we go. We got our green. And you can see that we selected most, but not all rezone sites to get to our green. So that's why I said there's a little bit more flexibility for the board up in the North County than there's in the South Coast. It's going to take more rezone sites in the South Coast to get to the magic number. But sites, just for comparison purposes, that didn't get pulled in this time were Glen Annie, part of Caird, and one of the St. Vincent's properties. And so really what this tool does is you can play around with it and just come up with different combinations of sites that you want to select. And then at the end of doing this, you can, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to submit this, but you can click submit, and that's you submitting your housing plan. And we will get a copy of it, and we're going to tabulate all the submittals we receive and share that information to the Planning Commission and board, just so they can hear what the members of the public might be interested in. So that's the balancing act tool. And yeah, I do encourage everyone to play around with it. And one thing it does is I think it helps explain that there are no easy answers or easy solutions to get to our arena. You know, for example, we've heard the notion of trying to spare the South Patterson agricultural block, this area, from being rezoned. Playing around with the tool, what you'll see is you can't get to your arena and preserve the entire South Patterson ag block. So difficult choices will have to be made.
Alex, could you just show Glen Annie lit up and take out a few and see, just so people sort of understand, because that's the big trade-off, right?
Yeah, so I'll take out Georgie, and you'll see I took out Georgie, and so we're back into the orange. But then I'll select Glen Annie instead. And we're back to green. So that's kind of, yeah, that's where a big of the trade-off. Those are two large sites that have the ability to accommodate a lot of units. And so we know we've heard a lot of people concerned about Glen Annie, a lot of people concerned about the ag block, but there's going to have to be some sacrifices, and no easy way out of this one.
All right. Well, this is fascinating.
So I can share the links to
Yes, please do that.
these in the chat. Let me see if I can figure out how to do that.
Okay.
Personal sharing.
And then Dick, you wanted Alex to kind of go through the rest of the process, is that right?
Yeah. What else?
Before we run out of time.
Yes.
And I do have to run in a few minutes. Okay, so what's next? We have the developer workshop on March 19th, followed closely by the rezone hearings. So we expect 2 hearings at the Planning Commission and likely 2 at the Board of Supervisors. The Planning Commission rezone hearings are scheduled for March 27th in Santa Maria, and then April 1st. That's a special hearing on Monday. Didn't want it to fall on April Fool's Day, but
Do they start at 1 or at 9, Alex, or what time do you expect those to start?
they would start at 9. They are both days are only housing elements, so there's no other items on the agendas
Okay.
at this point. And so
Can you talk about north and south at either hearing?
You can. I think the way we will present it is when we're up in the North County, the first hearing, we'll try to get through and get a recommendation for the North County. And then on the second hearing, we'll focus on the South Coast. That's our expectation. But that doesn't stop a member of the public from commenting at either hearing on either site's area.
These are hearings of the Planning Commission, right?
These are Planning Commission. Planning Commission with the rezones, Planning Commission has to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors is not beholden to that recommendation. They can come up with a different set of sites to select or come up with their own plan. But the PC does have to hear it first and make a recommendation. And so then we're looking at going to the board. We have a tentative hearing dates of April 30th and May 3rd. I think they're both special hearings. I say tentative because they haven't been confirmed yet, but that's potentially what we're looking at. So essentially end of April, early May.
Okay, this is happening very fast now, and people need to be geared up who care about this. So you got to go, right, Alex?
I can probably stay on for a few more minutes.
All right. So let's open the floor a bit to not just rely on the chat. If there's people with really pertinent and urgent questions, and maybe start again with Dianne because you're the designated hitter here.
I don't have any other questions.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm good with everything Alex presented. I think I understand it now.
So I'm going to put my gallery back up here. I think.
Can I ask a question then, Dick?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So for SBCAN, I'm wondering, the tool is, I'm going to play with it. I haven't played with it yet. Now I see it and I understand it. And I'm wondering if, and I guess it's a question for Dianne, do you expect that the league is going to come to some joint recommendation, or are people just going to submit their own?
No, there will not be a site-by-site recommendation from the league.
Okay.
I mean, frankly, our energy and focus is not on sort of these more neighborhood issues, because I think that's really what's implicated is where do you put these and how does it affect neighborhoods? It's really on the overall need. And like I said before, and I'll repeat myself because I think it's worth repeating, money, yeah, public sites, local preference. Those are our three things. And I would encourage people, once this process is over, the housing element is not over. There's going to be, program work throughout the next 8 years. And the long range planning division takes a work program to the board every spring prior to the budget to indicate what they plan to work on and to get input from the board and buy-in from the board on their programs. And so I think it's really important that the community focus on those programs as well, because the rezones are going to get us something. I'm not saying they're not going to get us anything, but I don't think they're going to get us all the way there. And so we just need to remain focused and supportive of the programs that we think will really matter in the long run on affordable housing.
And I will say that to Diane's point, in years past, I think we adopted our housing elements and then just kind of like moved on to other stuff and came back 8 years later.
We did a few programs, but not a lot.
A few things, yes. This time around, we are locked in. We've committed ourselves to a lot of implementation activities over the next several years. So it's going to be a continued significant work effort for quite some time.
Alex, do you know when the work program is going to go to the board?
Yeah, April 2nd.
April 2nd. Okay. So there's a date to put in the mix as well.
Yeah.
Just an historical note, because I'm old guy. I remember one time where all the county affordable oriented zoning was dumped into Isla Vista, which was clearly, a ridiculous thing. But in those years, that was kind of allowed by the state. You could just invent scenarios on paper that had no likelihood of ever becoming real. And that was the most dramatic and ridiculous, the one I remember, if I'm remembering correctly. And
So,
maybe I'm lucky that no one else has that memory because I'm older. But anyway,
so Dick, my memory is we used to just dump it all in the North County.
yeah.
And so the county, to its credit, is looking at the South County needs separately from the North County needs. And I think, it's making this cycle painful too, but it's important.
Right. Well, this is what we wanted. So Linda, you want a last word here?
I'm wondering, Alex, at one point, I believe I heard that you were going to try to find more county-owned property that was happening like now. Do you think that will be of significant size? Because it seems like we really need more land to get that other options of moderate income and so on.
Yeah, so what I would say is the county is looking at other properties, but not likely to be counted as part of this housing cycle.
Okay.
Because of the, again, needing to show a reasonable likelihood of them being developed over the next 8 years. So, for example, you might have heard Supervisor Capps talking about the parking lot adjacent to the county administration building in downtown that the staff use, and why shouldn't we look at developing that? They are going to study that. It's just the likelihood of that being developed in the next 8 years is low. So
Okay.
that might there is an effort at looking at all the county sites and all properties and but that's probably a longer term effort.
So just a little plug. That's Alex, you are towing the party line, but it doesn't mean it has to be that way. And so I think if there's enough pressure, things could change. So that's what our side is about.
Never hurts to ask what you want. Yeah.
So you're saying there's more room for county land to be used to be front and center in this that we're just implying?
I think there is. I mean, the county may not think there is, but the county has a responsibility to help solve this problem too.
Right.
They're a large employer. Alex knows it's hard to get people to work in even, pretty well-paying jobs. It's hard to get people to commit to this community. And so it's in the county's benefit to do some housing as well. So as well as, they're the ones that are responsible for the overall housing issue. So I just don't want people to feel like, oh, well, the county's not going to do that in 8 years. It's not that they can't. They may not, but they can. It's a choice.
Well, if there's any other urgent or interesting comment wanting to be made, if we could, with great gratitude, thank you, Alex, for giving us a very enlightening perspective on all this. And I think we all learned a lot. And Dianne and the league more generally, where would we be without you? You are the mainstays of citizen understanding of what can be done. And I would add one thing, which I often have been saying the last few weeks, which is get hold, the Santa Barbara Foundation report on affordable housing is a monumental step, I believe, in getting community behind the kind of perspective I think that Dianne and the League are reflecting, and groups like SBCAN are reflecting. Quite impressed that the foundation has put that all on paper with their imprint on it. What they're going to do about it, we'll see. And we've had a session with them at this roundtable to find out more about what their hoped for plans are. So I think things are there. There is potential. I agree with Dianne very much that we have room. We have a public anxiety and concern about housing. Even President Biden mentioned this in his State of the Union address, finally put some emphasis on housing, I noticed. And that's that's all to the good. All right. Well, having no other comments, we can thank our guests and thank all of you for being here. And thanks for the applause, Sarah. And we'll